Mermaid makeup tutorial. In Coney Island, New York, every year there's a mermaid parade. A lot of people really liked my makeup. A few people were asking me how I did it, if I could do a tutorial. So a lot of my makeup was temporary tattoos. I did buy regular temporary tattoos that look like fish scales. I found these on Etsy. They make different sizes. There was a small one. And there was also a big one that I used to look like gills on the sides where my lungs are. I'm not going to do the full makeup that I wore to the parade, but I am going to give you some tips on how to achieve the scaly look that I have going around my body. So those scales were actually achieved by using fishnets. A few days before the Mermaid Parade, I was doing all these makeup test runs, and what I found is that the size of the fishnet actually makes a difference depending on what look you want to go for. There are small fishnets like this, and if you do that, it's going to make a lot of tiny baby scales. From far away, it kind of reads like shimmers or freckles. And I was mostly practicing with small fishnets like this, but it was really at the last minute, like on the day of the parade, that I decided to go a little bigger. I used a medium-sized fishnet. I put this over my face to do, like weird scaly makeup on my face, and I used it on my arms, and I used it on my stomach to put scaly patterns everywhere. So fishnets come in all different sizes. So this is a larger fishnet with large holes. In hindsight, I might have used this on my arms or maybe on my stomach because they came out a lot smaller on the rest of my body because they weren't as stretched out as it was when I put it over my face. So I think for this tutorial, I'm just going to demonstrate on my leg, since it's easy, it's right in front of the camera. So before I put on makeup, I had like a little bit of sunscreen because I'm very pale and I didn't want to get sunburn. So if you have like a liquid foundation or a sunscreen or a lotion or anything like that, that will help your makeup stick, it will stay a little longer. So you would want to put that on your skin before you put the fishnets on. If you're going to put sticky gems on your face, you cannot have sunscreen on that part of your face. You can't have any previous makeup or else they're going to fall off. So I actually kind of wiped clean parts of my face with a little rubbing alcohol just to make sure that like all the dirt and everything was off my skin, make it nice and dry so those sticky gems would stay a lot longer. And then what I did was do the eyeshadow and added the glitter makeup after that and on top of that. But you do have to be very careful that you don't knock off your little sticky gems. So as a heads up, demonstrating on my leg is probably easier than trying to do it on your own arm or on your face because the trick is not to let this fishnet move. And when you're doing it on yourself, like on your own arm or on your face and you're moving around, the fishnet moves around. And that's like if you're trying to paint over a stencil and the stencil moves, you're not going to see the shape. So you have to find a way to secure the fishnet, whether it's like with a rubber band over your arm or like the elastic part of it around your face when you're working on your face. Try to make sure it doesn't move because the more it moves, the more smudgy it's going to get. The goal is to really have those like crisp fishnet lines so when you take it off it looks like scales, like you have little lines and spaces in between each little block of color. So I don't have the best makeup. I don't have any fancy makeup or stage makeup or special effects makeup. Everything I did was just with eyeshadow. If you've ever watched Bob Ross painting, he always says that you gotta put a dark color down for the lights to show, or you have to put a light color down for the darks to show. It depends on what colors you want to use. I found that for like bluish greenish scales, I actually put a yellow down first. And then I found that for like a pink, shiny, like peachy, iridescent color scale, that putting like a dark purple or a pink or like a fuchsia down first as like a base coat It's really just slowly building layers of color until you get what you want, and then on the top I put like a shimmer coat because fish scales look very shimmery. I'm using regular eyeshadow. It's not a liquid paint, so to make it a little more painty, all I do is just dip my brush in water. This is just regular water from the sink in a Dixie cup. And you have to be okay with possibly destroying your brushes or destroying your eyeshadow because the water can make things very messy. So I'm going to start with like some pinky scales up here, and then down here I'll do like a patch of greenish blue. So um, I used Jilted, which is like this fuchsia like magenta color, and I did that first. And you're gonna be like, oh, that looks really dark, but when you put like a lighter shimmery pink on top of it, it actually looks really good. You can't let your brush get too wet, because if it's too wet, then it's too runny, and it's just gonna like seep through under your fishnets, and it's just going to look like somebody threw a water balloon at you. You have to have your brush wet enough so that it saturates the eyeshadow a little bit so it sticks, because if you just did it dry on dry, it's just gonna be dusty and like kind of brush off. So you need a little bit of water, and when you are doing eyeshadow over fishnets, you have to blot it, because if you start doing brush strokes, you're going to pull the fishnet down with the brush, and you're going to be moving the fishnet up and down, and it's not going to stay clean. So you can imagine that this actually took a really long time, just because you have to be so delicate and you have to be so careful. It's a lot of building color, it's a lot of going over the same spots over and over again until you're satisfied. It's a lot of being very careful. You can't do anything too fast or too aggressive, or else you can mess up this little stencil that you've got going for yourself. So this is just like a dark purpley pink. And I know right about now you're getting eager to check, like, oh, I hope it looks good, I hope it looks good, but please do not lift up the fishnet until the very end. Don't keep checking and peeking, because it's going to keep moving the fishnet around, and, you know, even if it's off by a little bit, it's not going to read as clean lines and separated scales. So the more you move your fishnets around, the less scaly this is going to look. I think I added a little bit of this really bright pink too, Savage. You don't necessarily have to use Urban Decay. This is just what I have. You can use whatever colors you want. You may have something better. You might have like a more liquidy kind of eye makeup. All I really have is powder eyeshadow. So I'm mixing it with water to make it a little more liquidy. Right about now is when I went to some lighter colors. My favorite Urban Decay eyeshadow ever is Midnight Cowgirl, but I have none left. It's empty in there. It's supposed to be like a light shimmery pink. So I obviously can't use this for the tutorial. So I'm going to use a different color called X. It's a little more peachy, it's a little warmer than Midnight Cowgirl, but it will still give me like the shimmery effect. You don't need to wet your brush as much as you start getting to the very final layers, because your base coat is already pretty wet, so the dry eyeshadow is going to want to stick to the wet watery eyeshadow that you already put down. And I was very, very liberal with the top shiny coat. That's it almost seemed like the heavier I applied it, the lighter it looked. So if you wanted a lighter scaly look rather than dark colored scales, you can go heavier on the shimmery highlighty stuff at the end. You might want to give it a couple of minutes or a couple of seconds to feel like it's dry before you lift the fishnet off. You can blow on it. You can use a hairdryer. Now, when the time comes to take the fishnet off, you can't just yank it down like you're kicking off your pants at the end of the day. You have to almost like peel it off. You want as little of the fabric to move across your skin as possible. So instead of just rolling it down like a sock, you actually kind of have to lift it up and then take it off. And we got some little fish scales. And now we're going to do the same thing with green or blue scales. My brush still has some pink on it, but that's okay. So I used actually a yellow base. And it's funny because this eyeshadow almost never sticks on my eyelids, but you add a little water and it sticks really, really well on my legs. And it's kind of an ugly, pukey color, but it really helps the green stand out. Coming out a little orange because I still have the pink on my brush, but it's okay. I'm not a professional. I don't claim to be a professional. This is probably not even the right kind of brush. Yeah, look, this is a blender. I'm using a blender brush to like pat on eyeshadow. I think I could be a very good makeup artist. I just don't have a lot of the tools that the very, very good makeup artists have. I just work with what I got. Now I go on to some green. I think I mixed these two. I mixed Freak and Fringe together. I just, would go in one and, oh, this is too watery. Okay, look, here's a good example of making a mistake. This was way too watery. And now I've got this big fat raindrop right here. And it's going to like seep all the way under and you're not going to see any scales on this part. So we can try to blot that off. Some of the pigments are like thicker or thinner than others. I feel like the greens are really, really powdery, so a little bit of water goes a long way on these guys. See, that yellow was really pukey looking, but it makes the green look very bright. And I actually don't want all the scales to be the same color. I let them kind of vary and go through like a gradient. I let them fade from one color into the next. Now I'm just going into a different shade of green and I'm just kind of randomly going over different spots. Because when you see fish scales shine in the light, they almost have like an iridescent rainbow effect. They change color. They're not all just one flat color. So if you want them more blue, you can go into like a bright, obnoxious blue kind of color. I think on my body I actually did some dark blue. I think at this point I found a different shimmery powder to put over it. I can go over it with like a silver to make it look like a shiny blue. I can go in there with the dark blue. Who cares? Whatever color you want. I liked having different shades of blue and different variants of greens and blues. It looked shimmery. Alright, when you're done, same deal. You gotta lift the fishnet. You can't drag it over your skin. Ba-dum! Since my goal was to be mostly a green-blue mermaid, I went and I got green-blue, like mermaid glitter. This is from Uniglitter. I ordered it off of Etsy. And I got like the fat, chunky glitter sequin scales. And you can either get it pre-mixed with the sticky gel or you get the sticky gel separately. I got the sticky gel separately because my goal was, even though I didn't do this the day of the parade because I was in such a rush, my goal was to place the scales individually, and go in there with tweezers. But the day of the parade, I was in such a rush and I left so late that I didn't really have time to go in and be as precise, so I wound up just kind of smudging them. So what I did was you dot some sticky stuff on the scales. And you have to dab this too, like blot. You can't drag this across the scales or it's going to mess up all that hard work you just did with your eyeshadow. And then if you want to be really good and precise with tweezers, you can grab each individual scale with tweezers. But I wound up just taking a couple in my fingers at a time. And I'm not going to lie, a lot of them did fall off, in transit, just trying to get to the parade. I left a little breadcrumb trail of scales behind me everywhere I went. And this is my personal preference. I liked putting the sequins like in the middle along the center of the fish scale pattern. I didn't like putting them too far on the outside because I want your eye to be drawn to the middle. And it looks like that's the highlight of your body, that the brightest point is where the part of your body that's sticking out the most. So if I was doing it on my leg or on my arm, I wanted it to be the part wherever you want the eye to be drawn, and it's usually in the center of the body. So big scales are in the center. And then I also got smaller scales. These are more glittery and more like confetti looking scales. Um, I almost did like a fade out. Like I did big sequins in the middle and then fade out with some smaller ones, and then it almost looks like it blends into the whole fishnet pattern that you did with your makeup or eyeshadow. Now these are too tiny to really individually place, so you have to like be really careful. Less is more. Don't gob on too much of the sticky stuff at once, because then there's no going back. You can't really go back and fix anything. So you've got to be just very careful, choose wisely. I'm pretty liberal when I apply the smaller sequins because a lot of them just fall off immediately because there's so many of them and you never know which ones are actually sticking. So you can go a little heavier with the smaller sequins just so you make sure you get more coverage. So that's basically the idea.